on this beautiful, slightly rainy Friday at North Idaho College. I'm Laura Rumpler, the Chief Communications and Government Relations Officer here at NIC, and I have the privilege and the opportunity of facilitating this forum. So just want to say thank you to the faculty, the staff, and the community members that I see in the audience physically here in the Lake Coeur d'Alene room. And then I know we have a number of folks that are participating and watching this process on Zoom as well. Are we good? Okay, I just had some hand gestures from the staff in the back, so I just wanted to make certain that we're all good to go. So I'm just going to walk you through what the next hour will look like. We are privileged and honored to have Dr. James Taylor with us this morning, one of the candidates for our next president here at North Idaho College. I'm going to do just a brief little welcome and share a few things off of his bio. And I want to remind folks who are in the room, who are also watching, that we have the opportunity, everyone who participates in this process has the opportunity to give feedback on our candidates. So on our website, which of course is www.nic.edu/presidential search, you will see bios, complete bios of all of our candidates, as well as an opportunity to click on a feedback form. You can give feedback that goes directly to our search consultant, and then our search consultant from the Poly Group will compile all that feedback and give it to the Board of Trustees. Sound good? And then there's opportunities as well to have an open forum this afternoon for folks who may want to come back. There will be a series of questions that will be asked of Dr. Taylor this afternoon. Slightly different questions than this morning, but some common themes you will probably see for those of you who were here yesterday, as well as we roll through the day today. And then also Dr. Taylor will have the opportunity to interview with our Board of Trustees at 3 o'clock. Or 3:30. I apologize, 3:30 this afternoon, since it's a Friday afternoon. So are you ready for me to jump in? Okay, so Dr. Taylor is a Senior Associate Vice President for Utah State University and the Chief Campus Administrator for multiple campuses and educational centers in Eastern Utah. Again, you'll find his whole bio on our website, but just of note, he describes himself as a servant and expeditionary leader, and that type of style from his academic background and his experiences as an international alpine climbing guide. So welcome.
Thank you very much.
I'll let you introduce yourself a little bit more, say a few opening remarks, and then we have a series of 8 questions we're going to ask you.
So it's, first of all, good to be with you, and it's been such a nice morning. We actually flew into town to Spokane yesterday and spent the afternoon at the other 2 sites, and then just enjoyed the evening in Coeur d'Alene and the area. But the tour this morning with Ken, the CIO, as we drove around the campus, was so inspirational. We met many faculty and staff, some of whom are sitting here. It not only matched what I thought through my own research of North Idaho College, but exceeded so many of the things. You know, you always wonder till you meet a group of people. And frankly, as impressed as I am with the facilities and the campus, it's the people that I was most impressed with this morning. I do have to say one thing about my bio, just so you understand. I have worked in education. This will be my 30th year. My first year as a faculty member was 1992. But all through that career, I worked as a climbing guide in the Himalayas in South America, Peru, Bolivia, Chile, and Argentina, Ecuador, Mexico. That taught me how to lead the way I lead, which is really as a team, not me leading, but working to get people to be successful. And one of the things that I see already at North Idaho that I saw in my kind of guiding career was that I often was guiding climbers who were better than me. But they were doctors, attorneys, CPAs, school teachers who wanted me to do the expeditionary work. I see that already here at North Idaho. If I was selected and came as president, it's not that I bring a skill set that no one else has. It's my job to leverage the skills that those people I met today already have and their commitments. So there's much on my bio you're welcome to look at. Been a president of a private college, vice president and a dean, faculty member my entire career. Love education as a game changer for individuals and communities. So I'm just happy to be with you today. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Taylor. And that's a perfect segue into our first question so we can get to know you a little bit more. Why are you interested in moving to this region of North Idaho? And this 2-part question, what is your understanding of both the advantages and the challenges we have here in this region?
So I would imagine anyone that's looking at a presidential job, changing careers from currently running multiple institutions for a large research university, that question is really appropriate. Why make a change now, especially if, like it is in my case, we're successful, we're happy. There are three reasons this position and this opportunity are most appealing. Prior to Utah State, I was at a community college, a comprehensive dual mission community college in Colorado. In Leadville, Colorado is where I lived, up at 10,500 feet, and ran a community college system in the Arkansas Valley of the Rocky Mountains. I love working for a large research land grant university. I miss the genuine, authentic connection of the community college mission, which is heavily tied to a community and, more importantly, tied to access and that guiding mentality of helping people reach their potential. Universities are very good at what we do. I love and I'm proud of working for a university. I've been there 6.5 years now and have transformed multiple campuses into being more student driven. But I miss that kind of genuine, authentic community college feel that I felt this morning. Before I get to the challenges of moving to this area or the college as I perceive them, I also, I'm at a stage in my career, like I said, 30 years. I'll weave in some personal things. We have 4 children, 32, 29, and then we almost were empty nesters and then started again. So we have a 15-year-old, a 13-year-old, and a 10-year-old. So I'm not at the end of my career. I still have to get my 10-year-old through high school, through elementary, junior high, high school, and her college and university studies. So I have a fair amount of time ahead of me, but we are looking. My wife also works for Utah State University. She's a therapist in our counseling center. Our next move, we're hoping to be our last. So when we look at opportunities, we're looking at the community as much as the college. We're looking at the opportunity to help as much as benefit. And when I look at both North Idaho College and North Idaho, what I see is this tremendous potential that has been tapped before, is well poised. What I saw today is human potential ready to explode, much like I could see. My wife and I like to run marathons. We just ran, I won't give you the number because it shows my addictive nature. Well, I ran my 102nd last Saturday. My wife ran her 18th marathon, full marathon. When I gave up climbing, I had to pick up something else that filled that niche. That when you run a marathon, you taper for 3 or 4 weeks, or in my case, a couple of weeks before the race. If you're running in that week or 2 taper where you're reducing miles, you're ready to go. You want to run. You feel ready to race. I get the sense that North Idaho, so why this opportunity is really fascinating to me, especially after having been through the campus today, the college is ready to go. It's ready to, after this period of time, take off. And not because it hasn't been meeting its mission, but the potential is tremendous here. The other part of why this job is really interesting to me, or this opportunity, it's not just a job, back to my kind of servant leadership mentality. Many colleges, especially community colleges around the country, are changing their mission. And Utah is a good example. When I grew up in Utah, I'm from San Francisco originally, but grew up in Utah. Utah is eliminating its colleges. So we used to have a number: Utah Valley Community College, Salt Lake Community College, Snow College, Dixie State College. Dixie State became Dixie State University, and now Utah Tech University. Utah Valley Community College became Utah Valley University because they felt like that was a better position. I actually fundamentally disagree. Colleges have a community purpose. And one of the things that colleges that remain colleges are doing is looking at how do we simplify down to the point of just academics. North Idaho has maintained a traditional college position in the community. The campus, the arts, the recreation, the location. Why this campus is, the last major presidential search I went through was 5 years ago at Snow College in Utah, where I was a finalist. I don't apply to many colleges, but colleges that have this mission of being a comprehensive college that's committed to the community, where a president and an executive team can connect with the place. So those are the 2 reasons. The part about what would be challenges, I think the challenges would be there are many, many people passionate about North Idaho College and many people passionate about North Idaho. And passion to me is such a good thing to leverage in terms of bringing people together. And that's mostly my skill set. But passion also means you have to sometimes help people see a commonality, a working together to get something done. And that's the skill I think I bring, but it's the challenge that I think is ahead, is finally bringing these passionate stakeholder groups, constituency groups together. I also believe the challenge at North Idaho, and again, I am the experts are in the room. So I'm giving you, I've worked as a consultant in Colorado community college system. I will tell you, it's not just the vocal voices of the passionate groups that you've heard. There are people and groups in the region that have been silent. That group needs to be leveraged as well. And I say group, I mean groups, because they are passionate about North Idaho as well. They just have maybe been silent for a period of time. And I don't just mean a year or two. It may be they've been untapped for a decade in terms of what does the college look like in the future, meeting a broader audience. So a lot in there, but I feel like it answered most of those questions.
We'll bridge to the second question. What is your approach to college governance? As you know, at North Idaho College, we have a participatory governance model. So how do you approach college governance, and how do you involve a variety of voices when soliciting input, especially on controversial issues?
I can't imagine any controversial issues with North Idaho College. I actually have to tell you that 30 years ago, the idea of shared governance or participatory governance, I don't know, as an early, I worked into early leadership positions early in my life and career just because of maybe not personality. I actually grew up very shy, but just opportunities. And yet participatory or shared governance would not be something in my 20s I would have loved, because I just wanted to lead and you follow. That has evolved in my career, even outside of higher education, and climbing certainly was a part of that. Climbing big expeditions for 3 months with people, you learn that you have to work together. I mean, that's the group you're with. My value system now, and where I lead from now in terms of shared governance, I just mentioned it, is listening to all of the voices. But I think that the word, and this is a reference that only half of the room will get because half of you are too young, but the movie Princess Bride, where they say, I don't think that word means what you think it means. And again, a third of you laughed. I was hoping for half, but I actually think shared governance, people focus on the shared input and not always on the shared governance. And the governance means responsibility. If you want to give input, you also have responsibility to be stewards for what you're giving input on. And the leader isn't required in shared governance to do what every group says. The part that's missing, I think, and where I think people misunderstand shared governance, is that it's required of the leader, and that's a leadership team, not just one person, but to do two things: communicate through those listening sessions and working. So it could be the president's cabinet, could be the board of trustees, it could be the foundation, it could be a partner like a hospital system for a nursing program. If a leader only listens to those groups but never gives back that information in a repetitive format to bring all of those constituent groups along, then when the decision's made, it's made in a vacuum, and it looks like that individual made a decision without giving the groups time to evolve their thinking. Shared governance is a process of letting the groups understand that governance. But where that starts, and where I think, whether it's a college president or a CEO, or frankly in a family with a mom or a dad or a parent, I should say, I think it's the trust, that you trust the leader is listening. And then there are times, even in shared governance, where you make decisions that are not meeting everyone's goals. And hopefully through communicating, you've given the perspective of all the groups. But even in the end, there may be decisions made that someone doesn't understand. You have to be in a position where people generally trust you. So I actually am a trusting person by nature, although over time it seems to be whittled away at by society as society changes around us. But I still believe in the good nature of most people. I used to say the good nature of all people. I've evolved a bit. I think shared governance works when everyone approaches it from a humble standpoint, instead of shared governance from an egocentric or my way matters. So shared governance gives a better outcome. I also have to say, back to leadership generally, my style is servant leadership, but it's more transformational. And one of the things I butt heads with at Utah State University and my team that's underneath me, if someone on the team is getting a master's degree or a PhD and potentially wants to leave the university, I am all for helping that individual evolve in their own position in life, because when they retain and stay at Utah State, I get a much more committed employee. So shared governance is leveraging not only people's input, but it might also be that we're not the right institution for every person at every time. So shared governance is messy, it's not easy, and it's probably, when it comes to a presidential role, the number one thing is that communicating over and over again. I think the group that probably is most negatively benefited by a good president who's good at shared governance is those in the home he lives in or she lives in, because you have to repeat so often, you sometimes repeat at home everything as well. So it can be challenging for those closest to, or the cabinet, because there's a lot of repetitive conversations.
Thank you. The next question, you've already alluded to your appreciation of and your desire to be part of a comprehensive community college again. So this question is specifically about that. How would you facilitate and promote a holistic approach to education that includes students who are looking for formal and informal learning opportunities for credit, non-credit on campus, virtual, hybrid, a formal schedule, a flexible schedule, everything and all in between?
How would I meet the needs of everyone?
Yes.
Yeah, right.
Facilitate, promote a holistic approach.
I do like the question. When I came to Utah State University from a community college and ran these I still run these campuses in Eastern Utah. So I have communities that are heavily oil and gas based in the Uinta Basin. I have communities that are recreational based near the national parks, heavy influence from both the Northern Ute tribe and the Navajo Nation. One of the campuses in Blanding is 67% enrolled by members of the Navajo Nation. Very different groups. But when I came to Utah State, one of the consulting firms that I've worked with for decades, Noel Levitz, gave us a survey that we had done of our students. And the title of the survey, which was handed to me, was "What Our Students Want." And I remember reading that with a little bit of a reaction. I don't want to know what my students want. I want to know what my students who aren't coming want. I need to know what the group's not being met by the university. And we've done that. So when I took over in Eastern Utah, our average age of our students was about 29, 30, returning for MBAs and other master's degrees in social work, teacher education, getting licensed to work in rural educational systems, nurses, the RN program and BSN program. But what I realized, we were not capturing traditional freshmen at our university. And some of that was because traditionally they would go to a four-year college. But as the nation has changed, students aren't seeing the need to or the expense of a major metropolitan college or university. They want a community college. They want to stay close to home. Even the idea and Coeur d'Alene's different than this. Coeur d'Alene reminds me of when I had Aspen, Colorado. No one leaves Aspen. They stay because they don't want to leave. Coeur d'Alene is very similar. A lot of other rural communities, and I've spent a lot of my time in rural higher education. The perception by parents, because they felt this way, was that they want to leave. The perception today by young students is they do not want to leave. What they want is to have their needs met where they are. And I would say that applies here as well at North Idaho College. And I already picked up on that from students I met this morning and actually last night when my wife and I ran down along the river and then the lake. Students want to remain. So meeting the needs of students, as varied as they are, requires that you don't do everything you've always done, but actually expanding. And so on my campuses in Eastern Utah, to meet the needs of freshmen and sophomore, which is the population that North Idaho mostly serves, I had to create things like disc golf. By the way, some of what I'm saying you'll laugh at because you've got such an extensive recreational and engagement campus here. I'm envious. I kind of want to come back to school at this stage, but I had to change the nature of the campus to be more student driven, to be more student centered. Not just recreationally, but behavioral and emotional support. And that included counseling centers that we had in our Logan campus, which is north of Salt Lake, an hour and a half, but not at our rural campuses. And yet my rural students, who were potentially 74% of my students are female, juggling a family if they're not traditional freshman, sophomore, and may not even get the support at home to finish their degree. I had to expand not just disc golf, but counseling, disability services, technology for students who didn't have the resources to access our online education. So I do think your question of how do we do that at North Idaho, luckily what I see in the culture of the college here is innovation. As I drove around with Ken today, the chief information officer, I joked with him, I have a brother that's a chief information officer for another major university in Utah that's a competitor of the university I went to as an undergraduate. He always gets said he's the computer son. In our family, there's 5 boys. One's passed away of cancer, but my mom always jokes that he's the one over computers. Ken and I talked. Chief information officers are not computer people, they're strategy people. This college has built into it a strategy, again, that's already working, but thinking ahead. I do think the pandemic introduced a lot of new ideas in terms of soft clients like Zoom and instruction. I've always maintained the faculty role just so I know what that's like. I only teach 1 class a year at this point, but you have done a good job of building a culture and a campus that has innovation and strategy still already present. But I do think there's groups and students, as I look at the enrollment drops, that could be leveraged to retain and remain here rather than just highlighting those groups that we currently serve and the reputation. The best example I can give is at Utah State, we have a scholarship for legacy students, someone whose parents or grandparents were Aggies. It's a great scholarship. We actually should be leveraging, they have generational wealth. If their parents and grandparents went to the university, most likely they are well off enough to afford the university. What we need to be targeting is first-gen students who don't have a legacy of higher education. And so I've raised, most of my scholarship and foundation work has been students who are first generation, which by the way, in our nation is becoming the highest percentage of students attending. So I could ramble on, but I'm going to stop because of time. But I enjoy talking about how do we serve student needs.
Well, absolutely. So you can continue to talk about how we serve student needs as well as employee needs with this next question. So how have you in the past in your roles, and how would you here raise morale and create a sense of community for all employees and all students?
Sure. Again, I alluded to some of this, and I'm going to stand and walk just because that's my style. I feel, and so I don't mean to stand right in front of you, but I'm going to just walk this way because I see some of you falling asleep and I want to kind of get you to look left or right. I said some of it is I like to empower people to challenge not students, but staff and faculty to improve their own situation, either return for a graduate degree or continue their own education, or actually go to conferences that make them more relevant in their current teaching or faculty role. The reason I do that is because I think if we're not learning, we're demotivated and we don't have the skill set. Teaching shouldn't be something you do without learning also. And so if we're going to be effective and efficient and motivational as a teaching institution, we also have to be effective, committed, and dedicated to learning. And that could be HR. I talked to you two from the HR department just before the meeting. If we're not sending our HR people to either conferences, and luckily now it's easy online, but giving them time to access that. If the workload is so busy that you can't leverage learning yourself, I do think we lose part of the identity of a college. I have a dean of students who works for me on one of my campuses, and he's been in education as well, almost as long as I have, although he's retiring in the next couple of years. So I'm a little envious of that in terms of just being done. But he gets worried when I empower employees underneath him with scholarships to go back and get a graduate degree. And we just recently lost one of his employees, not from my system, but to Logan, to the major university system, in terms, she just finished an MBA that I encouraged her to go back and finish. And then she did. She elevated in our system upward and now works in our Logan campus in our recruiting and student services department. He and I would disagree. He would see that as a negative. I would see that as a positive. And the reason it's a positive for me is we may have lost her, although she is now embedded in a group that I need to leverage for my support in Eastern Utah. But she also is a model for all the other staff and faculty on my campus. And so again, as a leader, whether that's those I directly supervise on my cabinet or as an institution. And there are a number of staff and faculty here. Each individual has their own needs. It can't be that I meet every one of those needs, but I can change the culture of the people who report to me, that we're going to help people change and improve their own situation. It literally could maybe be not more education. It could be becoming healthier. It could be a more balanced approach to family and life. One of the things that I have as a campus goal at 3 of my campuses is a healthy, happy, efficient campus. And the healthy and happy matters, because if employees and staff aren't healthy and happy, students don't get the best service. And by the way, as you know as well as we do in Utah, outside of higher education and including higher ed, it's hard to get workers today. They're not just wanting healthy and happy, they're also wanting a lot of other accommodations that are hard to meet. Higher ed cannot stand the way we did 100 years ago and have our staff motivated if we don't change how we lead. So one last thing is, I do think, again, this is not something that's a mistake or missing at North Idaho. You have to know why we're doing what we're doing. And of all of the colleges that I've been to, maybe I'll use the last 3 years, I don't think that's missing here. People understand the place and the purpose of North Idaho College. And again, that goes back to that kind of community college. It evolved here, it's represented here. It's part of the community. So
Thank you. Absolutely. Since 1933.
right, 90 years almost.
Just so you know, you're doing fabulous on time. We're at the middle mark of our questions. And
Anytime someone says you're doing fabulous, that just is, that's nice to hear.
We're right there at the middle mark, and I'm rolling to question number 5. So what are challenges that you see the next president of North Idaho College facing? And how would you plan on addressing them if you became our next president?
When we did the first round of interviews, one of the questions that came up were I don't remember how it was worded, but something about what are the challenges you see for North Idaho College? And I will answer now in this answer a similar thing. It's sometimes easy to see the current maybe status of the college as the challenge. The challenges that North Idaho is facing are not things that maybe have happened today during the pandemic. It's a changing demographic of students. And I guarantee that any sort of small challenges that North Idaho may be experiencing right now in terms of governance or any issue related to that, I actually think that's a distraction, a red herring for where we should be focusing our energy. Students are rapidly changing what they expect, and they're demanding what they want in education. Whether that, I met with Doug Anderson, the dean, yesterday. He and I connected on competency-based education in terms of the trades and career education. I look at Western Governors University out of Salt Lake, which is 148,000 students and really grows every year. It's like a cancerous growth almost, how fast they're growing because they're meeting student needs. At Utah State, we're one of the top 10 educational universities for educational degrees, teaching degrees in the nation. But it takes 5 years to get through our teaching program. And I've argued for the 6 years I've been there, and having worked in K through 12 education at the beginning of my career, teachers don't want to spend 5 years to become teachers. And in rural Utah, I wouldn't say potentially in northern Idaho, but other parts of the state, it's hard to get teachers. It's hard to find teachers who not only will take a job, but will maintain that job and stay within a rural community. So we developed at Utah State steps, paraprofessional certificate, which the districts then give a little raise, associate degree, where the state has changed the laws in Utah, where the local superintendent can credential them for 2 years. While they finish their degree, they're earning as they go to school. That's a model that I saw having run a nursing college with many nurses. They want to work as a CNA, potentially, but an LPN for sure, and then an RN, then a BSN. They get to earn while they go to school. That's a change in our style. When I went to the University of Utah in the 1980s, I lived at home and I went to the university. I had jobs, warehouse jobs, other jobs to get me through. Our students today are looking to merge family, life, responsibilities, even at the community college level. And if we don't plan for that and we build a system that doesn't meet their needs to be able to take classes, so to build our entire educational process around 8 to 5 is actually what used to be wanted. if we don't modify that, I think the 8 to 5 matters to North Idaho, and it matters to me because I also don't want to run a college where I walk down the main part of the campus and see no students. That's actually a mistake. But if we don't leverage technology and innovation to meet those needs, and I'll give you the best example, the students from the Navajo Nation during the pandemic, all of a sudden you realize that 75% don't have access to Wi-Fi. So here you have a whole group that you feel like you have a system that's meeting, and then they can't stay at the campus and they have to go back. We leveraged some relationships with partners to put hotspots in locations, but most of them were doing pretty high-end academic work on iPhones, which also incurred a cost. There are things we need to think about for meeting certain groups of students. When it comes to North Idaho and the student population we serve, there are so many things we can do better in terms of not technology. I've been pretty impressed with the technology here. And I would also say not commitment. I also sense a tremendous commitment. I think where we need to do better, and I'm going to go back one more time to climbing. When I left and take a group on a rope across a glacier, if we're all roped up to avoid crevices, and I'm leading that group, but everyone on the rope's moving different directions, we're not moving forward. And I think what we need is to move forward together in a synchronous way that we can actually meet the student needs. The last part is I have not yet met with students formally, and I know I meet today with members of the Student Association. Fascinated to hear their perspective, because one of the things that higher ed has done poorly, not here, but in general, is actually consider what students are telling us. We tell them what we think they need, and that has rapidly changed in the last 2 years as they experienced a different world. One last thing I just have to say, having done a lot of work with college advising, consulting, many of the promises that I was guaranteed and played out in my life, like a career, get an education, the numbers are still correct. An associate degree, a bachelor's degree does equal more earnings. But if you look at Coeur d'Alene, and I'm going to use Salt Lake where my 2 oldest daughters both live, neither will ever buy a home in Salt Lake City. Coeur d'Alene, for many graduates, may never be a place they can buy a home. So if we're telling people get a degree and you'll be able to get a home, or get a degree and you'll have a retirement, or we have to find a message that resonates. And this group of students in this generation, and I say this generation, but we're teaching multiple generations, the promises that we were told are not the promises they believe in. So it better be something more meaningful about making a difference in the world and something that's going to help them grow. That's where we need to change the kind of the message and the value around education, because that's what they're looking for.
So this next question has 2 very distinctive topics all embedded into one question. So if you don't mind, I'm going to split them out into
Sure.
2 different
That sounds
questions. Okay. As college president, what is your perspective on academic freedom?
Not only, so that's the first part of the question. Is that correct?
Yes, that is the standalone question. And
Okay.
then I'll ask you a different question.
100% supportive of academic freedom. Again, I don't want to quote Princess Bride again, but I think sometimes academic, that word doesn't always mean what you think it means. But what it does mean is the freedom to teach and instruct. And I also think a university and a college has a responsibility to empower faculty members to be what they believe and teach in a way. If we assume that college students somehow are hurt by faculty members having academic freedom, we're underestimating the moral development and the human development of college-age students in terms of, I don't have to protect students from every small instructional idea that might be presented in a class. That's part of the journey. I went to the University of Utah and then I went to Montana State. Ken, you and I talked about Montana State. I was in the sciences and my wife actually went through the social sciences. I guarantee no one challenged many of my morals in biology, although today that's different, by the way, but in biology and earth science and ecology. But in social science, that could be very different. It could be challenges to someone's religion, someone's family values, someone's identity. I think if we protect and couch faculty members to a way that we approve their entire curriculum. Here's what we need you to teach. Here's what the We should have outcomes. We should have standards in education. But if we do that, we actually limit the beauty of education, which is faculty and students learning together. I don't think academic freedom means that you should be teaching something that's harmful, detrimental to society. There are limits. And I actually believe faculty members, for the most part, I am still a faculty member, and someone might argue this even about me, but we're generally committed to our purpose. There are systems and processes in place to catch faculty members who go off the rails. And you have to have faith that that will happen. It may not happen. You could have a lecture, a class, or a series of classes, or even perhaps 2 semesters. But if someone needs help academically, a faculty member, it'll get caught. But that doesn't mean that one lecture should be an impetus for a major inquisition around instruction. I work in a system where we have tenure, and where I say that word doesn't mean what you think it means, and I'll stop quoting Princess Bride. But I will say this: tenure does not mean you can do anything you want. And we have a lot of faculty at Utah State from all over the world with incredible degrees, but there's still a responsibility to teach effectively and within bounds. But I do think that's the value of a vice president of academic affairs, a student senate, a faculty senate, governance, that you allow the process to catch and correct. That's not the role of the president. The role of the president might be at the appeal level when that process did not come out the way that someone felt was right. But the president should not be heavy-handed in that process.
Well, not to quote Princess Bride, but you just almost foreshadowed, and all I could think of was the two little wizardly people have fun storming the castle. But you read my mind with the second part of the question when you alluded to tenure. So the next question is, and you can elaborate on it, as a college president, what is your perspective on tenure?
That's funny about the 2 people saying having fun storming the castle. Tenure is at a university, it could be very different than at a college. And I think tenure is tied to the institution. But as a general rule, I just told you, I like empowering faculty and staff to continue to develop and grow. And you might lose 1 or 2 from that process. You also want to do everything you can to make them feel stable, secure, and comfortable in their role. Because one of the things that will happen as baby boomers, and I'm just barely under the baby boomer official deadline. I kind of identify with baby boomers a lot, but my baby boomer friends tell me I'm not one. But baby boomers have stayed in higher education for a long time. It's a career that hasn't forced people to leave. And so presidents, deans, department heads, and professors within most of our college systems around the country are in their 60s and 70s. What that means is in the next 10 years, as they retire, which they will, and I think the pandemic and the stock market has delayed their retirement a bit, but when they retire, if colleges and universities haven't worked into their culture retention through tenure, benefit, and security for faculty, it will be very easy for faculty around the nation to move in the next decade as those opportunities become available. And it's clearly already becoming that way. I have faculty positions right now. I typically do not like to search in the summer. In fact, I never searched for a faculty member that did not get advertised at my level at the university in November and December, because the best applicants will apply in January, February. I can interview by March. If I open and advertise for a faculty member in July, I typically don't get faculty members who will meet my standards. I just got funded by the state of Utah with a grant that was laid after the legislative session for another nursing faculty. Nursing's a little different than my academic programs. 119 applicants for a position that pays $55,000 a year. So clearly, people want to work in higher ed, but we have to create a system where we can maintain them and keep them here. So tenure is one of the ways to reward faculty for engagement, research, if it's a research institution, or effective teaching, and longevity, so that we're not losing our best faculty members. Tenure does not mean, again, in my mind, that that's an untouchable faculty member. In fact, in education today, we see across the night. Luckily, I haven't seen in my research, but we see faculty doing things they shouldn't do. And there's systems in place to take care of that.
So Dr. Taylor, you had the opportunity yesterday, as part of your tours, you went out and visited Workforce Training Center.
Correct.
And then Parker Technical Education Center. So what are some of the things that you might do to help facilitate collaboration between our credit and our non-credit side and programs here at North Idaho College?
You know, one of the advantages I have at Utah State that many do not is that I came through a career and technical college background as well. So I ran a nursing college that did offer AAS degrees, but we also offered certificates. Sometimes in higher education and universities, we forget the value of career and technical education. And first of all, let me just say the Parker Center would stack up against anything at any institution where I've ever been. It's just an amazing, beautiful facility. And as Doug Anderson drove us around, it's not that big. As we walked around, every time he'd open a door, we'd go into a shop, whether it's the welding shop, the fabrication shop, the mill shop. It was like a mall. It just opened up into a huge, beautiful venue. That is, you know, again, I'm going to use the analogy of teaching. My mother was a teacher for 45 years. My mother-in-law was a teacher for 40 years. I have a daughter who's been teaching for 8 years, although she's changing careers right now. I'm going to use teaching, and then I'm going to use Betty Becker as an example as we walked through yesterday from the foundation. And Idaho Forest Products, I can't remember the name of the company. You know, if they can graduate with that millwright certificate or training and make $80,000 in a year, and I look at teaching, which is a valued profession. I love teaching. I actually think it's the right career for many people. But we traditionally tell some people, like women, be a teacher, be a nurse, for some archaic reasons sometimes. Oh, you can be home with your children. Well, we may be looking at things wrong. Career and technical education is not only going to be needed more and more in our society. And when you talk about a community college, meeting the workforce needs of evolving corporations and economic centers, that happens most quickly and most nimbly through career and workforce development, not through academic programs. Academic transfer programs are critical to the mission of a college and the region. But if you look at a tier and say that career and technical or certificates and trades are less than academics, you're limiting the kind of resources that could change an individual student's life. Think of a woman who makes $80,000 as a single mom, as a millwright, versus $40,000. I promise that'll make a difference in the course of that family. That doesn't mean teaching's a bad profession. I actually think teaching's an incredible profession. If a college looks at trades and technical education as something we have to do rather than something that's part of our core mission, because we're more proud of the academics, we're actually cutting off probably the most committed and dedicated faculty. When I met Vicki yesterday, and I asked her, and I'll say it in a way that will just highlight her passion. I said, do you ever feel like you could be represented better? And she said, I love North Idaho College. I'm paraphrasing a bit, but there's always more light we could shine on what we do out here. And I couldn't agree more. You need a president, whether that's me or someone else, and I would imagine all 5 of your candidates hopefully have this background. You need someone that appreciates, doesn't see career and technical education as just a kind of a ancillary or burden of the job, because that's actually where you're going to see growth. The academic career transfers will be the kind of mainstay of a campus like this and the culture. But what's going to make the difference for high-paying executives in critical jobs and corporations that will become donors to the college later on are the career and technical trades. And they're not less than jobs, by the way. They are very important. The last part of that is that most people, my father, I mentioned to 2 of these fellows here, one from the USGS and another engineer right before the meeting. My father's an MD and he's been practicing medicine for 55 years. He's 85, still practices medicine. Most of my friends I went through the University of Utah with in biology that practice medicine, they've all retired or changed careers. Most of our students who graduate in an academic field will change careers 6 times before they finish their career. trades and college training isn't about having them locked in that career. It's a stepping stone to what's going to be next. And you'll see in the next decade, I believe, more people having an academic degree going back for trades and credentialing within a specific skill set. Welding is such a good example. So is fabrication, injection molding, carbon molding. Those are careers that pay six figures. And someone could have a degree and go back and do that. So we have to be committed.
You're still doing great on time.
Great's not as good as fabulous. So
Well,
uh-huh.
fabulous
Thanks.
and great and everything in between on your time. And we have just about 10 to 12 minutes left. So I have the last question for you.
Okay.
And then after you answer the last question, the floor is yours. If you have any wrap up thoughts or comments, or if you wanted me to go back and ask you any one of the questions again, if you had a light bulb moment or wanted to further elaborate, the time is yours.
Sounds great.
Sound good?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. This is a 3-part question, so I'm going to take it in 3 parts just
Sounds
to help
good.
you out. Does that sound good? How do you develop talent at an institution?
The first part for me, and honestly, I would say this is one of the strengths that not only did I develop later, but I had early on, was hiring the right people. So for me, when I hire faculty and staff, when I look at cultural change, and I'm going to give a specific example. My campus in Roosevelt, Utah, only has about 200 students that attend there. Many are from the Ute tribe, the Northern Ute tribe, but many are also from oil and gas families in the region. The first day I went onto that site, my entire student services team had notes on their doors that said, "We're playing basketball. If you need help, come to the gym." Or "We're out to lunch. Call this cell phone number and I'll drive over to campus to meet you." And by the way, I don't care if this gets broadcast out, which it is, because they all know this, because I changed the culture by not firing people, but I had 8 members of my student services team. I only fired 1, but I changed the culture to a point where here's what we're going to do as a team. And that whole staff is turned over. And of my staff now, 5 have come from a partner technical college to come work for me. So when you ask, how do we improve talent, change talent? First of all, hire the right people. Hire the people that have a mindset and a growth mindset that's similar to the culture. Hiring and turnover, hopefully by attrition, not by firing, that's the best way to change your culture, is finding the right people. I would say that one of the things I enjoy the most is every position on my campuses. I don't get involved in the searches, but when they get down to their final 2 or 3 candidates, I ask that they bring those candidates to me so that I can meet with them. And I actually give those candidates, I just say to them, this is not part of the interview. I'll answer any question you want about working for Utah State University, for working for us in this campus, but we want to make sure they fit. So that's step 1. Number 2 is, so often in higher education, we're very inefficient about leveraging, although I have to say, as I drove around and I heard from multiple people, we're understaffed, different departments that I won't quote because I don't want them to get in trouble from other departments on the college campus. You may not be inefficient because you might be understaffed, but we have people who just spend time in their office. They don't do things. Part of it is developing a culture where instead of finding a sweet spot where I can just slide through higher education as a staff, what are you passionate about? So my student services teams, my deans of student services and directors of student services, I make them meet with each of their employees and say, what is it that you want to do within your scope that will help? And I think of a woman who's a coordinator in one of our campuses. We have a first-year program very similar to the first-year program I heard here. What I do get is a lot of students who drop out around their junior year. Either one, life comes into play, husband or spouse or wife lost a job. So she wants to be passionate and is going to develop a 3rd and 4th year retention and persistence program to keep those students. And we've talked about that. It wasn't just about my students. It's about her. It's about giving her some passionate purpose within her scope so that she can actually say, I was able to get this done while I was doing my job. So I think hiring the right people, giving them something to do they're passionate about. And third, I would even say the underperformers, are not underperforming because they're bad people. They've just gotten to a point where they just don't have someone who said, let's work on this together. HR, I'm speaking to HR experts in the room. Most often HR problems grow into bigger problems because no one kind of corrected the error early on. So.
Part of the question. When you were talking about helping people find their passion, how do you help employees gain new skills at all levels of the institution?
Yeah, and I just, you just said those light bulb moments. I have to go back to that last thing. I also think if a leader's not passionate about what they do, it doesn't matter. All the steps you put into place, if the president or the executive team or the cabinet, if they're not passionate, if they've lost their belief in education or the system, you could do everything you want. You won't be effective. So, the second part, repeat it again, because I was still.
How do you help employees gain new skills or upskill or find new passions potentially, or give them professional development opportunities at all levels of the institution?
So finances in college education are certainly challenging. We cut budgets when enrollments go down. It's hard to find money for programs. We may look for innovative ways to bring in money, but every dollar spent on training of faculty. Faculty on my campuses, I have a certain training budget for them. About half of them underspend every year because they don't like to travel. They don't like to go to a conference, although the pandemic changed the way they go to conferences quite a bit because they can attend from their office. But I do think my goal has not been to limit their spending, although I have some that I have to limit their spending. But those who never spend money on professional development or never go to a conference, I actually have an administrative assistant who gives me a list of someone in the last 6 months who has not done anything about professional development. So instead of saying who's spending too much, I actually go meet with them when I visit the campus and I say, what can we do to get you something that will help? And it may actually be not money related. It may simply be time. And I've actually found lately it's more time than money for most of my staff and faculty. And it's not time at the job. It's that their lives have become so busy. It's that the job is almost a recuperation time for them because, especially during the pandemic, if they were a mother of children at home, they were juggling so many things that when they came to work, it's almost like they needed the task-oriented projects because the higher level thinking, they just didn't have the reserve, the elasticity to get things done. So for me, I meet with those faculty and staff and talk to them about what's next for you. I also think identifying, and this goes back to faculty. Every Wednesday I have on my list of things to do, meet with a faculty member. And I don't meet on Wednesday. I just decide who, and I go to lunch or I meet or I go for a walk, go for a run with a faculty member. And we talk about where are they going next? And sometimes that's actually about them, but truthfully, it's also about me. I'm always thinking, what are we going to do together? So I think they need to have a mentor and a friend. And that doesn't have to be me in every case. It could be a department head. It could be a chair. That culture has to be built in where someone's watching out for those who are not doing something. I'll tell you, the group that I worry about the most are the ones who don't ask, not because they don't want to do anything, but they don't want to be a burden to the system. And I know so many employees, and I will put a gender category on this, female employees who won't ask because they just don't want to be a burden. And so someone has to watch out, and not only for females, but anyone who's in that category. No, it would cost $299. Ask, find out. So
now the third part of that question, as we wrap up, this will be the last question. You've talked about what's important to you about hiring the right talent, and you've talked about helping uplift people with gaining new skills and such. How do you keep good people?
One of the things that I have seen at some institutions, I won't name them by name, is the idea of retention through finances. So someone gets an offer somewhere else and we say, oh, I'll give you more money. Almost every time I've seen someone get an increase in pay, some sort of retention package, within a year, they're looking again because they're leaving for a reason. They're not, money can be the reason. And if that's the case, we should talk about it. But throwing money at retention isn't actually the most effective. It's asking them why. What did we not offer you that you found that you might get on that other side of the fence where the grass appears to be greener? Often it's more about the culture of some place or a department, or I have a supervisor who doesn't treat me with respect, or a supervisor who doesn't see me for who I really am. There needs to be not just a whistleblower process, but, and again, with HR people in the room, I will say this, I've transitioned my performance evaluation system at Utah State, and now the whole entire university is doing it this way. Instead of a yearly annual evaluation, when I came on board informally, I had quarterly conversations where you tell me not what have you done, but where are you? What are you feeling? What's going on in your career? And so instead of a once a year, tell me all the good things you've done, tell me where you want to go and what your goals are. It's actually a process where it's more iterative and ongoing, where we talk about what's holding you back, where do you want to be. So retaining talent, money can be the issue, but almost always it's because something in their career, in their position, is not meeting their needs. And almost always it goes to their identity, their passion, their belief of what they should be doing. Although there are a handful of people I don't want to retain. So there are people who the best thing for them is actually not the current job where they are. And I think of someone that worked for me and just was not succeeding. And all of the conversations led to what you're asking is not this industry. What you need is somewhere else. And actually, this person went and is now teaching 5th grade and succeeding tremendously because that's what they needed. That classroom environment is what that individual needed and is much happier. So sometimes I know the question is about retention. That actually leads to retention because maintaining people that are hurting the system actually is a retention negative for many others who watch that.
Thank you. So again, we just have about 2 or 3 minutes left. If Dr. Taylor, you want to share some final remarks and then we'll wrap it up.
Sounds great. It has been nice to be here. And I should have picked a movie reference from, this century for some of you. But I just have to tell you that it's been interesting for me. I didn't apply early in the process. And I saw the announcement when the job was first announced. I applied, in fact, probably within a day of the closing of the process. I've always liked the region, and I've always loved colleges like North Idaho that still maintain this classical community college feel or vibe, but also an innovative culture around improving. What got me to consider and to apply was the more research I did. Instead of uncovering problem after problem after problem, what I uncovered was an incredible passion by the community for the college. And one of the reasons I at Utah State have refused or don't want to go to Logan, which is our main campus, is that I like being in a place where the institution where I am makes a big difference in a community, not just part of the community. And North Idaho is important to this region. That's one of the things I uncovered. The second part was your students are selecting to come here because of what they've been getting, but they're also selecting to come here because of what they think they'll get. And North Idaho has a traditional value system around education. It's clear, even when I met with George in the library today and Lisa, talking about library services, colleges are eliminating libraries in many places, thinking it's a cost savings. It's a mistake to not look at the traditional values of learning, not only information. I mean, libraries are not old, libraries are new. That's where information is gathered. Faculty today sometimes forget that that's how students learn. They may collate information rather than memorize information, but they need to know how to get there. You have maintained first of all, you have an incredible location, but you've maintained a traditional college value system, so it meets that college goal, but you're not archaic. You have a tremendous upside in terms of being innovative and poised for the future. I do believe that the next president will benefit by being at North Idaho, and I used Utah as an example. Wyoming still has good colleges and, one major university. You're going to find that if North Idaho positions itself correctly, regardless of who the next president is, over time, and I would say a decade, North Idaho will not only get enrollment from North Idaho and Idaho. I looked at where the enrollment comes from. Utah doesn't even show up on the enrollment for North Idaho College. That's a mistake because Utah's losing that college fill. There are other states around the nation. You'll start to get a more national enrollment at North Idaho College because of who you are, not because you've delayed changing to something else. So I look forward, if I am selected or if I'm the right presidential candidate, to that journey. I don't have all the answers, but I believe the answers are in the room and in the community. So thanks for letting me be with you today. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor, for choosing to apply and to go through this journey and for being here today with us. We have many more adventures with you and for you as the day progresses. But I want to, on behalf of the faculty, the staff, the community members, the students that are in the room here, as well as those that are watching on Zoom, thank you for spending time with us. And thank you all for participating in this very meaningful process. And again, just as a friendly reminder, you can give feedback about Dr. Taylor and all of our other candidates and go to our website at www.nic.edu/presidential candidate, or actually, I apologize, presidential search. And you'll be able to again see Dr. Taylor's bio and then have the ability to give some input and some feedback so that will be collected and gathered and given to our trustees. Have a wonderful rest of your Friday. Thank you so much.